Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so today we are going to talk about or introduce the cell cycle. So in this video, we're going to kind of summarize the important concepts that were discussed in class. Um, and we're going to go over them real quick. And so that way you guys can refresh. And if had any questions, hopefully this video will help out. So just like organisms have offspring from tiny organisms to very large organisms as small as, we'll say, I don't know, a mouse to as big as a rhino. They all have offsprings. Our cells kind of do the same thing, and it's what we call the cell cycle. So in this first video, what I'm going to do is introduce the topic to you guys and give you guys or review some of the concepts that were discussed in the class today. So the first thing we want to know is that, or we want to say, is that cell cycle is the regular pattern of growth, DNA duplication, and cell divisions that occurs in eukaryotic cells. So cell division, or the cell cycle, which is what we're going to talk about, occurs in eukaryotic cells. It's not that prokaryotic cells don't divide, it's just that the cell cycle, the way that we're going to see it, mainly occurs in eukaryotic cells. And this is not only where the cell grows, but also where the DNA is duplicated. All right. It says this process is divided into 4 phases. G1, which is also called gap1, the S phase, which is also called the synthesis phase, G2, which is called the gap 2, and mitosis. Now, technically, G1 and G2, so G2 was discovered later. When scientists first started to discover this, they thought there was just 2 cycles, and the G stands for gap because in the first days when this was discovered, it was kind of like where scientists saw that no cell growth was occurring, of course, through the development of techniques and technologies. That was later found out not to be true. However, the names remained. Now, it says that the G1 S phase, G2, and mitosis make up what is called the interphase. Okay, now let's talk about them individually for a bit. The G1 or gap 1. In gap 1, cells carry out their normal functions. Cells increase in size and organelles increase in number. So the cell grows and the organelles inside the cell also begin to increase in numbers. The fourth thing that happens in the G1 phase is that cells spend most of their time in this phase. So it's worth noting that cells spend most of their time in this phase, and that's going to depend on what type of cell we have. If we have a neuron, or if you have a muscle cell, or a skeletal cell. So the G1, the length of the G1 phase is going to depend on that. It says the fifth thing worth noting is that cells pass a checkpoint. So in the G1 phase, where the cell increases in size and its organelles increase in number, they also go through a checkpoint, kind of like a quality control, where the cell makes sure that there is no damaged DNA or any other abnormality or that might occur. And if that were the case, then the cell usually just eliminates it. The second phase of the cell cycle is what we call the S phase or synthesis phase. Of course, this is the second phase of cell division or the cell cycle. It says that cells make a copy of its nuclear DNA. So the DNA inside of the nucleus divides in the S phase. The third thing worth noting is that the cells contain 2 or complete sets of DNA. So once the nucleus DNA divides in the S phase, the cells have 2 complete sets of DNA. After the S phase, we go into the G2 phase. And in the G2 phase, it said, of course, it is the third stage of the cell cycle. Secondly, is that cells carry out their normal functions just like they do in the G1 phase. The additional growth occurs. And just like in the G1 phase, in the G2 phase, cells pass through a checkpoint. After the G2 phase, we have the mitosis, which is the fourth stage. Now, in a little bit later on in the chapter, we're actually going to talk about mitosis more in detail and talk about most of the phases that occur in mitosis. So in mitosis, it says the fourth stage of cell division. It says that it includes mitosis and cytokinesis. Mitosis is the division of cell nucleus, or excuse me, so it's the fourth stage, and it includes two phases within itself. One of them is mitosis, and the other one is cytokinesis. So let's talk a little bit about mitosis. Mitosis is the division of the cell's nucleus and its content. So in the S phase, just the DNA of the nucleus divides. In mitosis, the entire nucleus and all of the content within the nucleus divides. Um, the fourth step thing worth noticing is that the duplicated DNA condenses around proteins and separates from to form the nuclei. So in mitosis, the nuclei is formed because the duplicated DNA condenses, around proteins. The fifth thing worth noticing about mitosis is the cytokinesis. And in the cytokinesis is the process that divides the cell's cytoplasm. And the sixth is that from the division of the cell's cytoplasm, we have two daughter cells that are exactly genetically identical to the original cell. So basically, in mitosis and cytokinesis, the cell not only divides everything that not only divides the nucleus's content, but also because cytokinesis occurs, you actually have cells kind of like cloning themselves if you want to compare it to something. Some other facts about the cell cycle is that the rate at which your cells grow or your cells divide is linked to your body's needs. So cells in our body are going to divide according to what they need. Now, for example, if we have a broken bone and the bone is healing, then we need those. Your body knows that they need to produce those skeletal muscles. So then the rate at which they divide increases. Another thing about the cell division is that the S, G2, and M phases together usually take about 12 hours, but it's actually the G1 phase, like I mentioned a minute ago, that it's the length in which the cell is in that G1 phase is going to depend on what type of cell we have. So it varies from cell type to cell type. And the last thing is that a cell's size. So cells, how do cells know how to grow and when to grow? Because if they grow too big, then they're bigger than the original cell, so they can't last any longer. If they grow too small, then that means they won't have enough energy to survive. So a cell size is actually limited by its cell surface area. So it depends on where it's located, or the surface area that is around the cell. So guys, this is a very brief introduction to the cell cycle. Hopefully this video will clarify any doubts that you had. So stay safe, and we will see each other soon. Bye.